All right, let's go ahead. We're going to start with about 3 different percent problems, okay? So let's start with the first problem that says, what is 13% of 40? Okay, so I'm going to write that down. What is 13% of 40? All right, now, when we're dealing with percent problems, it's something we need to know. And we need to know that we're going to be dealing with a proportion where you have a part over a whole is equal to a part over a whole. So remember that. When we set up a proportion, you want to always make sure that the part is in the numerator and the whole is in the denominator, okay? And we are dealing with a case where we're comparing 2 ratios of fractions. So the goal is to move from this question to setting up a proportion. That's about 70% of the problem. If you get that right, then you're ready, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. It says, what is 13% of 40? Now, we're going to translate that. When you see 13%, you write 13 over 100. If it said 20%, you would write 20 over 100. So we have a part over a whole. Then you put your equal sign. It's like a puzzle. And then I'm going to put that bar right there. Now it says of 40. If it's of 40, then 40 has, we know that that's the whole. So whatever we're trying to find is the variable x. And that's what it's about. You think it through in that manner, open your mouth and talk yourself through it. Whatever number comes after of is going to go in the denominator. And once you set these 3 up, you know the other is the variable. You can use x, q, p, it doesn't matter. Now you know the cross product, so we're going to use that strategy. So we got 13 times 40 equals 100 times x. Don't skip any steps because you want to be able to check your work after you're done. All right, so 13 times 40 gives us 520 equals 100 times x. Okay, now I'm going to write this again so I can make the next step explicit. Write it again. And the opposite of multiplying x by 100 is to divide by 100. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you do to the other side of the equation. So 100 divided by 100, that crosses out, right? 520 divided by 100, and you're going to get x equals 5.2. What does that mean? 13% of 40 is 5.2. Now, if I wanted to check that mentally, I can say, what's 10% of 40? Move that decimal over 1 space to the left, that's 4. 13% is just a little higher, so 4 is close to 5.2, using the estimating for checking your work. That's when you have an equation that says, what is 13% of 40? All right, so let's move on. So let's say you have a question that says 25 is, look at this, what percent of 75? Now we're going to break this down. We're going to translate this question into an equation. All right. So watch how I write it, how I set it up. You know that you're going to have an equal sign and you're going to have a bar on each side. So you can always set it up like that. So watch this one. 25 is always means the equal sign. Now watch this. What percent? When you see what percent, remember when we said 13%, we wrote 13 over 100? What percent is x over 100? Aha! Remember, I said it's like completing a puzzle. You got 25 in there, you got what percent in there? Only thing you're missing is 75. By default, 75 must go here, but let's think about it. Remember, I said whatever number comes after of is going to go in that denominator, 75, comes after of. 25 is equal sign. What percent, right? X over 100 of 75. 75 must go there. Cross product, 25 times 100 equals 75 times X. Multiply, we get 2500 equals 75 times X. Okay? Remember, I like to write that step again just to make it explicit. I'm going to write that again. And then remember, in order to isolate X, we're going to divide both sides by the coefficient 75. 75 divided by 75 is 1. That crosses out. We end up with X equals 2,500 divided by 75 is 33.3. So it says what percent? So if you write 33.3, you're missing something because we're calculating the percent. So what we should add is 33.3%. Just be careful with that. Okay? Always after you finish the problem, go back to the question. What was I asking? What was I looking for again? Oh, what percent? 33.3. So 25 is 33.3% of 75. Very nice. All right. But this one is going to say, it's going to start out by saying what percent, which is a little different. I'm going to write it this way. Okay. Sometimes they may spell it out. What percent of 60 is 12? So it looks a little different. Last time it said, I don't know, what did it say? Last problem. It said 25 is what percent of? But now this one says what percent of 60 is 12? It doesn't matter how they write the question. All you have to do is know how to set it up. Okay, and that's what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on building your capacity to solve any percent problem if you know how to set it up. You already know how to use the cross product when you're solving a proportion. So we're going to go again from this equation to an equation. So what percent? Can somebody tell me, what do I write? Matter of fact, can somebody volunteer, someone I haven't heard from yet today, and tell me what am I going to write? What is the equation? Try it. Tell me what equation I should write. Come on. Test out your knowledge. Test out your understanding. All right, I'll start it off. I'll put an equal sign in here and here. What goes here? What goes in the numerator and denominator right here?
You're going to have X over 100.
Yes, for what percent? We're going to have X over 100. Right? And then what are we going to have?
over 60.
12 over 16?
12 over
because
60.
It's a 60, yes, of 60. So 60 has to go in the denominator, right?
Yes.
So we get 12 over 60. All right, so here we go. We're going to write 12 over 60. And let's see, we got something in the chat. All right, someone there coming up with the answer. So let's go ahead and show the steps. So we get 60 times X, right, is equal to 100 times 12. 60 times X equals 100 times 12. All right, we bring down the 60 times x equals, and we're going to get 1200. Okay, I see several answers in the chat. We're going to divide both sides by 60. And then we're going to get x equals 20. There we go. Okay. All right, let me go ahead and check the chat just to make sure everything's clear over there. Yes, 20%. And then yes, don't forget, it says what percent, right? So you want to put 20%. What percent of 60 is 12? What percent of 60 is 12? Well, 20% is. Okay. 20% of 60 is 12. All right. Another way to say it's 12 is 20% of 60. That's another way to say it. All right, let me go ahead and erase. Okay. Looking pretty good. All right, I think we've done well with these percent problems. Let's move on and let's deal with, I wanted to get through those because those problems have multiple steps. What about when we're converting percents to decimals? Okay, converting percents to decimals. So let's see here. Check my notes here, all right? What if I give you a percent that's, let's call this part A, okay? And we're going to say 32%. And we need to convert that to a decimal. Now, the decimal technically is right here. See where that green dot, that's where the decimal is, on 32.0%. But what we're going to do is these two circles right here in the percent tell us to move the decimal. And when you're converting it from a percent to a decimal, you're going to move it 2 spaces to the left. So that means we're going to move that 2 spaces to the left. All right, or I think I'll just write it like this, 32%. And I'll move it 2 spaces to the left. Uh-oh, not quite. Originally, the decimal is right here, 1, 2. It's going there. So then our final answer is going to be 0.32. That's converting a percent to a decimal. Move that. So that I want to make that step explicit. Yes, you can write 32 over 100 and do long division, or you can use this shortcut strategy. Okay. All right, so let's try it again. Let's say we have a fractional percent. How about that? 3 and 3 over 4%. Doesn't matter. Don't stress. Doesn't matter. We're still going to use the same process. Okay, so right now we want to rewrite this 3/4 as a decimal. So we're going to rewrite it as 3 and, you see the decimal as and. Remember, I said some of these fractions you want to memorize as a percent, as a decimal. So 1/2 is written as 0.5. 3/4 is written as 0.75. And remember, again, these two circles are telling us to move the decimal 2 spaces to the left. And what's going in, so you already got a number in that cup. You're going to put a 0 in that cup. So then when you write your final answer, the decimal is coming here. You have 10375. So I'm just going to write here that you are moving the decimal 2 spaces to the left. So you might want to write that down. When you're converting from percent to a decimal, move that decimal 2 spaces to the left. That's a shortcut. All right. Okay, now let's see what you do when you are converting from a decimal to a percent. Okay. When we're converting from a decimal to a percent, okay, let's say we have a decimal of 1.32, okay? And in this case, we want to convert it to a percent. In that case, you need to move the decimal 2 spaces to the right. So I'm going to write 1.32, and I'm going to make it explicit what we're doing. We're moving it 2 spaces to the right. Make an arrow right there. And when you move it 2 spaces to the right, you get 132%. So while somebody else is still doing long division, you're done. Okay? It's all about technique and strategy, 132%. What if we have 0.06? Same thing, doesn't matter what decimal, you're still going to move. If you're going from a decimal to a percent, move that 2 spaces to the right, that decimal right there. When you do that, you end up with 6%. Okay? So in this case, what are we doing? When you're converting a decimal to a percent, you want to move the decimal 2 spaces, don't get them confused, to the right this time. When you're going decimal to percent, decimal to percent, 2 spaces to the right. When you're going percent to the decimal, 2 spaces to the left. All right, so make a note, study note card or something. Maybe that can help you so you do not get them mixed up. Very easy to do. Okay. All right, let's move on. Let's take a look at converting a fraction to a percent. How about that? Converting a fraction to a percent. Let's see here. I think I'm going to introduce a new color. Let's say I have 30 over 100. I'll make that part A. And I need to convert this to a percent. First thing we're going to do is we're going to convert the fraction to a decimal. That says 30 over 100. So you write it as you say it. You also read it as 30 100ths. And you write it the way you say it, 0.30, 30 100ths. How do we know it's 100ths? The last digit or the first digit, depending on how you look at it. But this digit right here is in the hundreds place. So that's 30 100ths. This is 30 100ths. Now, you already know how to convert the decimal to the percent, right? 0.30. If you're converting from decimal to the percent, you end up with 30%. Fraction to the decimal to the percent, move it 2 spaces to the right. The decimal 2 spaces to the right, you got 30%. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Some of you may be looking saying, wow, I remember learning this stuff back and it didn't seem that simple. It is straightforward, just like that. All right. Now, if you wanted to do it the long way, you could do long division, right? Right. You can say 30 divided by 100, right? You would get a decimal, right? If you did all the steps, you would get 0.30, but you still got to move that decimal 2 spaces to make it 30%. Okay, excellent. Well, we just talked about converting fraction to a percent. How about converting a percent to a fraction? You knew it. That was coming up next. So let's see here. If I have 25% and I want to convert that to a fraction, I write it as 25 over 100. Remember? Okay, it's a fraction right now, but it's not simplified. And if they say simplify it, you ask yourself, what's the largest number that can go into both 25 and 100 completely? And you're right, it's 25, 4/4, right? So we divide this by 25, the numerator and denominator. And when you do that, you're able to simplify it. 25 divided by 25 is 1. 100 divided by 25 is 4. Hence, 25% is really equal to 1/4 as a fraction. Let you stare at that for a moment.